Okay guys, welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. Hope you had a great holiday. I'm about to go on a trip to Cabo for a week, so I want to get this video out for the first of 2023. And it's based on something I mentioned in a short. I was at YouTube short. I was at 3MA and I asked you guys as I'm panning around looking at the speakers, which comparison shootout did you want me to do? And unfortunately, there wasn't really any unanimous conclusion other than I noticed a lot of people were interested in the YG, which I have featured in the past. And so let's dive into that in a little more detail. I featured it in my friend Doug when he was looking for speakers. He looked at the YG Vantage, Rockport Atria, and the MBL 101s. I have a whole video series on that audition. And then he picked the MBLs, and I have a whole series on him getting those installed. So you may want to check those in the archives to hear that. I've also had some videos in the past with the YGs, with subs and playing some songs and just in that same room that they are now. Now, why are they still there? Well, that's a good question, because anecdotally speaking, of all the speakers I've seen come through 3MA and that move and sell pretty quickly, for whatever reason, the YG Vantage hasn't resonated with customers as much. And so I'm just going to echo for me, I don't think it's the best speaker in that price point. There are some things that it super excels in. And for my friend Doug, it was basically his second choice when he was doing those three speakers. But I think one reason why it doesn't resonate with a wider audience and it hasn't moved and sold as quickly or going even on as many demos and stayed at the person's home is that it's a speaker that requires certain taste and certain setup. So let me dive into that a little bit more before I talk about the Wilson, because I know the YG a little bit better. Number one, it does require precision setup. One thing that 3MA has learned over the years is that now that they have it set up and dialed in much better in that room, the performance is a much higher bar than previous. So if you have heard it in the past there, you may want to go check it out now, much more. And this is something that Steve McCormick actually told me as well. His thoughts on YG is that good speaker, of course, but does sometimes require precision to the inch of setting it up to get the maximum performance out of them. Now, the other thing about the YG that you have to think about is that it's not full range. It's almost full range. It does give you everything that, whatever it does do, it does at a high level. One of the things that stands out to me with that speaker, every time I listen to it, it's almost like, man, I'm almost listening to headphones. The level of clarity, resolution, detail, precision, everything, you just think, man, that must be a super well designed driver, super well cohesive unit. Everything you are getting out of it comes out with not a lot to complain about when you're looking at individual metrics. The only drawback that I think is what is missing at that lower tier of YG versus the 2.3 and higher, which is some of the best speakers I've ever heard. And in fact, one of the best rooms in all of Houston I featured the YG 2.3, is that it just doesn't have that full range and that lower mid-range and mid to high bass energy that's capable with that driver to really, especially at high levels and on certain songs. I think a lot of people may find it a little lacking in terms of if you're going for that super high bar of performance. I mean, I'm talking about best of the best. So let's talk about that generality, you know, where these speakers stand. A lot of speaker brands, their best stuff trickled down quite well. I would say Magico is one that from the M series to the A series, you can argue there's not even a ton of difference in the technology that they're using. A lot of the same technology is all the way down. And the level of performance, the size of the cabinet, 200-pound cabinets at A series. You could argue that the value equation for Magico is easily at that A series, and level of performance is very close to the top. Now, I haven't heard the M9 yet. Plan to go see that in January when I do a site visit. That one probably, I'm almost sure, is going to have a huge leap forward because it's got an active crossover, which none of their other models do. And knowing what active crossovers can do in my Wisdom audio, I usually point this way from my Wisdom because that's where my other room is, in my family room. It's not these speakers. These are not Wisdom audio. But I know what that can do for bass performance, an active crossover, and There's just nothing better when you don't have all those passive parts in the way. And the amp is basically connected, a sole amp connected strictly to those bass drivers. Done right. And again, and I'm sure Magico does it right. So I'm expecting super high performance bar with the M9, and especially in the bass area, I can almost guarantee that's where I'm going to be totally wowed compared to their other models. But with the YG and Wilson, I'm more of the opinion that the trickle down is not as great as with Magico, but sometimes I think that their higher models are at the same price point, may even be preferred to Magico. So like the YG 2.3, I think is one of the best speakers in that budget price point, and one that I would consider as a box speaker. Tremendous performance, gives you that true full range that the Vantage really isn't capable of, but still gives you that precision, detail, clarity, everything that you would want from a speaker. On every metrics you can judge it on is just near perfect. Wilson as well, some of their Wilson Max 3s that I've featured at that home in Vegas, that's a great speaker. And then as you go higher, the level of performance as you go up the Wilson range, I think gets a considerable jump up from the Sabrinas. So we're talking about speakers that if you want to get into that luxury brand, have that pride of ownership of having a YG or Wilson, these are going to be the ones you probably look at as starter. I mean, ultimately, if you're going for the highest level of performance, these would be step one and not end game, in my opinion. There's just a little bit too much lacking in terms of full range performance. And the dispersion characteristics, like, let me compare it to my speakers here at home. I'm open baffle fan as well, but I have sealed box bass, which the YG is a sealed box. And let me go ahead and deviate on that real quick. One big difference between the Wilson and the YG is that if you play a track like I have in the separate video I'm going to release with all the music tracks, like Victor Wooten, a lot of bass energy, and you play it really loud, that's where you can kind of tell if you're going to be a sealed box bass guy or a ported bass guy. You're okay with that. Because when you hear a sealed box bass done well, again, there's always going to be exceptions of how it's implemented, but both of them do their things well. But the precision, detail, clarity, pitch definition with that track on the YGs is exceptional within the range. It doesn't give you enough oomph and full range for my taste, but with the Wilson, it's a little more nebulous, but gives you that oomph, and you can almost sense the port chuffing and the cabinet coloration to the bass with that ported enclosure versus the YG. So this is a good A-B comparison to see which one you prefer. I tend to think more people like having that extra oomph that the Wilsons have versus the YG. But if you're a bass precision and probably the higher fidelity on objective metrics, you're going to give it to that sealed box. And that's why I kind of prefer and recommend people save up to get to 2.3 pretty soon within the YG line, because that at least gives you then the full range and the sealed box, which is kind of what I'm doing here. Sealed boxes for my sub frequencies, so I can get that pitch definition, not a lot of the port chuffing or any kind of nebulous colorations of the box as much. And then open baffle bass for things that I like here. And here's the biggest difference. If you're a fan of tall line sources and stuff, neither one of these speakers are going to be near what you prefer. Like for me, they're discounted right off the bat for my taste on strictly that, because most of the presentation, like I've said many times with box speakers, it's in the bottom half of the room, mostly, maybe 60%. And that's a deal breaker to me. I like the immersion of point source arrays, line arrays that give you at least that feeling of, there's just an added level of realism and spatialness, and that I'm not listening to speakers. That is important to me. And many open baffles have that, plus some other advantages that if you're an open baffle fan, you can go ahead and probably guarantee yourself that these two aren't going to be your thing. But if those things aren't important to you, you're used to box speakers and don't care about those, which many people don't, then you're going to want to look at that bass pitch definition or the more nebulous oomph of the Wilson. Then the other thing you're going to look at, the YG, as I think I mentioned, it kind of reminds you of listening to headphones. The clarity, detail, all those things are so good that in a short audition, I really think people will be wowed by the YG because they might hear things they haven't heard before with that tweeter and mid-range, and how clear and detailed. Impulse response, I'm sure, is really good with that. And I think that's what stood out to my friend Doug with that speaker. Now, over a long haul, I kind of think that some people might like the Wilson presentation because the tonal balance is a little more full at the bottom, and mid-range and bass gives you that oomph that, as long as you're not really a nitpickler for super detail, super clarity, and resolution, the overall tonal balance of the Wilson and coherency, and a little bit more than just the bottom 2/3 of the room, presentation and dispersion and spatial cues, I think is a little bit better with the Wilsons. Not enough to convince anybody it's line source, open baffle, immersion type fan, but it's a little bit better there. So it's going to be two speakers that I think you should audition in short doses, see if you have a preference. Audition in long doses, see if you have impressions with the highs and the lows. And then, like I did in the videos to follow with tracks, play a variety of tracks, variety of music, female, male, orchestra, and then EDM. And then also, like I did as well, play at different volumes, because there are limitations when you go down further in the lines of these speakers of what they can do with the drivers they put in the boxes. There's only so much physics, no matter what technology they have, that they can do. So make sure you know that when you crank it, are these giving you what you want? Now, what would I recommend as an alternative to any of these in that price point? The one that comes right off the bat to my head is the Techniques reference speaker that I featured in the past. Comes into 3MA every once in a while. If you ever want to audition it, let them know. If they ever get it in, you can take a listen. My friend Ryan, who's a member of the channel, owns one of my servers as well. He used to go through speakers all the time. Get 3MA to send him speaker. He liked to gear swap. That speaker has been in his system for a while, longer than any other speaker. Still has it. Doesn't look like he's going to be changing anytime soon, and I wouldn't if I were him either, because again, Techniques doesn't have the brand name sexiness of an audiophile like Wilson and YG or Magico, but at the price point, I'm just going to be honest with you. Of all the things I've heard at 3MA, that one is one that I would consider in these price points or even lower that will give you that performance, or higher. In that case, I think it's easier, the better speaker of all three of those for my taste. Now, what I'm going to do in the future is go up the tier, maybe do the Estalons, the A5s, some of the other ones you saw in that picture, the Paradigms. And then the Acoras are higher up. So we can do some more shootouts in the future. Let me know in the comments what you think of the music clips compared to what I relate to you, what you can tell and not tell, and then any other of those comparisons you want me to prioritize. I do give preference to members of the channel, so join the membership channel. Let me know in the WhatsApp group if you want which ones. And I'm going to be directing more content this year based on what members tell me they are interested in. So a few other perks I'm going to try to do this year. So again, Happy New Year. See you back here soon, hopefully with a tan from Cabo, and sign up, subscribe. I'll see you back here soon.